Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dollars and Dreams Hour. We actually have a great session today. We have Patric Dukemajian here, which was going to be talking to us about Bitcoin and everything about coins also as well, pros and cons. So we're going to dive in and try hopefully give you guys a little bit of more information, education towards your future podcast endeavors in Bitcoin. But before we start, I just want to do a disclaimer that there is no advice in this podcast. So whatever we're doing is for educational purposes. Those of you who are investing and so on and so forth, this is just to add to your education, to kind of give you guys our opinions and bring you guys a little bit of more information for you guys to make an intelligent decision. With that said, Patric, just introduce yourself to our viewers and where you're coming from, what you've been doing, and so on and so forth,
Sure.
and how you landed here.
Thanks, Sarkis, for having me on. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Patric. I go by Bitcoin Motorist on Twitter and on YouTube. And I'm working with a company called Bitcoin Mentor, and the website is bitcoinmentor.io. And what we do is there's a lot of people who have heard about Bitcoin and they've went out and they bought some Bitcoin. But even close friends of mine who I've told about Bitcoin years ago, they went out and they bought some Bitcoin. But then I was noticing that when they bought the Bitcoin, they were just keeping it on the exchange that they purchased it on, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of Bitcoin, because the whole point of Bitcoin is you can control your own money. You have your own keys. So what I noticed is a lot of my friends were coming to me and they're like, yeah, I have Bitcoin, but how can I store it safely? So I was helping them, teaching them how to withdraw their Bitcoin from the exchange and keeping it in a hardware wallet or keeping it in cold storage. And I noticed that this was a kind of a thing that people needed help with. So I decided to work with a company called Bitcoin Mentor. And basically what we do is people who have Bitcoin or are interested in getting into Bitcoin or are interested in Bitcoin mining. And if you want, Sarkis, we can talk about mining as well a little bit today. They reach out to us and we sit down. We have one-on-one sessions with them where we, hour-long sessions usually, or sometimes more follow-up sessions if needed, where we set them up with with their own cold storage. And we do inheritance planning as well, because a lot of people have Bitcoin. They have a few Bitcoin and they want to make sure that if something happens to them, their heirs are able to access this Bitcoin, because it's not just a regular bank account. It's like, are your heirs going to be able to figure out what your password is to get a hold of your Bitcoin if something happens to you? And we want to make sure that we set it up so that it's easy, so that their heirs know what to do if something happens to them, and they know where to go to access those Bitcoins that the person wants to leave behind to their children and to their loved ones. So this is what I started doing, and the reason why I was doing is, like I said, I was already doing this, basically just with my friends and everything. And I was also, doing this just because I like Bitcoin and I want to teach people how to use Bitcoin properly. So I was very interested in making sure that people are taking control of their own Bitcoin, because the last thing that I want to happen is for someone to listen to me and to buy some Bitcoin and then they leave their coins on some sketchy exchange, and something happens, that exchange goes bankrupt or something, and now they can't access their coins because now they have to go to court to get their coins back. That defeats the whole purpose. The whole reason why people got interested in Bitcoin is because they didn't want to trust other people to hold their money for them, and they wanted to take ownership of their own money and not have to worry about a third party handling their money for them. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, by all means, reach out to me and we can help you out with that.
Awesome. Usually you go first.
I'll give you the mic today.
That one of the things that you mentioned is the storage, right? And not being able to access it. I was just recently reading something that said this guy is actually suing a disposal company, those trash yards and stuff.
Yeah,
because
landfill.
Landfill, which one of his hard drives was there, and he's suing them because they were not actively trying to retrieve his hard drive, which had millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on it.
Yeah, that's a real tragedy. You know, I don't really understand what that guy was thinking, because he heard about Bitcoin, you know, back in like 2009 or 2010 when nobody knew. I didn't know about Bitcoin back then. I hadn't heard about it back then. Very few people knew about it. And back then you could generate your own Bitcoin. You could mine your own Bitcoin with just a regular laptop computer. Right now you need like specialized equipment to do that. Like if you just use your regular laptop or even a GPU to mine Bitcoin now, you're just basically burning electricity. You're not going to be able to make any money. But back then, because it was so much easier to mine Bitcoin back then, so he had set up his computer where it was using his computer CPU to generate Bitcoin, and he generated thousands of Bitcoin. And then he turned it off because he said his girlfriend was complaining about the noise that the computer was making, because it was always working and the fan was always going. And I always wonder, why did he put that part into the story? Because that has nothing to do with him throwing away his laptop. The fact that his girlfriend complained and he turned it off, it seems like he's trying to divert blame to his girlfriend. She wasn't the one who threw away the laptop. He was. So he turned it off, but he still had thousands of Bitcoin on his hard drive. Back then, they weren't worth anything. Like when Bitcoin, and this is kind of an interesting thing about Bitcoin, is for like the first, I want to say 13, 14 months of its existence, Bitcoin had no value. It literally had no value, or you could even argue that it had negative value. Like people didn't want it; they would actively avoid it. So Bitcoins had no value back then, but he realized that there was Bitcoin in there, so he put his computer, he stored it off to the side. Then he spilled water on it. The story was he spilled water on his laptop, so he took the hard drive out of it and put it in a drawer. And then later on, he threw away the hard drive. I mean, who throws away a hard drive? I mean, nobody. I mean, people have hard drives from like 15, 20 years ago. Nobody throws away. He threw away the hard drive, and then he found out that Bitcoin was worth $100, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm a millionaire!" And he went to go look in the drawer, even though he knew it wasn't there. But yeah, you know, we want to avoid stuff like that from happening to you. So you know, if you have say a Bitcoin now, it's worth 60 something, $68,000. I didn't check the price this morning, but is worth something in that range right now. And you may think, oh, okay, cool, it's worth 60 something $1,000, but let's say it's worth a lot more in the future, you know. So you want to make sure that you're kind of being responsible and in storing your Bitcoin, so that you don't do something silly with it. You don't have like a maid find a piece of paper in your house while she's cleaning it and throw it away thinking it's a piece of trash, and that was your private key, that was your backup, and now you lost your private keys. So, or worst case, maybe maybe right now she finds that piece of paper, she's not going to know what it is, she's going to throw it away. But let's say in 10 years from now, when everyone knows what that paper is, now the maid finds it and takes a picture of it with her phone and goes and steals all your Bitcoin. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your coins secure and you're not making silly mistakes. Because when I help people set up their wallets, a lot of times the first thing they want to do is, let me take a picture of my backup with my phone. I'm like, do not take a picture of the backup with your phone, because those get stored on the cloud, and if that gets hacked, which it has been hacked, people's pictures have been hacked before, that's not secure. So I'm like, take this paper and put it in a safe. Don't take a picture of it, put it in a safe someplace, so that if you ever lose your actual device, you can go back and you can retrieve your coins.
I think the best thing is putting in a safe deposit box.
Ironically, yes, it's in a bank, right? In a safe deposit box. We're saying we don't trust the banks, but we still trust the banks for certain things. I'd rather put it in a safe deposit box than say, keep it in a cloud storage, device or something.
Because if the banks go out of business, your box is still your box, right?
Right. Or at the very least, you have time to go and move your coins before they go inside and take open up the box. If the bank goes out of business. Yeah.
In my opinion, you're very important in the Bitcoin field, because what was it, a couple months ago, whenever there was a guy that hacked into somebody's he was hacking into people's Bitcoin accounts or crypto accounts, and they were stealing money, and how he got caught, correct me if I'm wrong, was he was spending way too much money. What was the story behind that? So
there's a few stories like that one. You might be talking about Razzle Khan and her husband Ilya. I forgot his last name, but I think Razzlecon, her real name is Heather Morgan. So, and basically, it's not known for sure if they were the ones who hacked the coins, but basically, Bitstamp lost something like tens of thousands of Bitcoins in a hack, and somehow they were trying to, these guys were trying to mix the coins so that they couldn't be traced back to them. And I think that the feds caught them because they were basically mixing coins, but they were mixing way more coins than everybody else was. Everyone else was like throwing in half a Bitcoin, a quarter of a Bitcoin, and they were throwing in like hundreds of Bitcoin in these mixers. So it was still kind of easy to track them. And I think that they were eventually convicted of trying to mix the coins, which mixing coins isn't illegal. It's legal to mix coins. But if you're trying to conceal a crime while you're doing it, then in theory it could be illegal. I'm not a lawyer, by the way, so check with your own attorney to double check that. But basically. But they weren't convicted of the actual hack, so no one's sure for sure if this is the couple that did the actual hack in the first place. But they were the ones who were caught with the coins, so they were convicted of receiving the coins and trying to send them through a mixer. And mixers are an interesting one because in theory, like I said, there's nothing illegal with mixing your coins, but sometimes some wallets, they come with the capability to, when you deposit into that wallet, to mix your coins. And a lot of these wallets now are saying, we're not the one. They want to step away from it because they're saying like there's two that I can think of off the top of my head that are really good mixers. One is called Wasabi and the other one's called Samurai. For some reason, they want to take Japanese names, But Wasabi Wallet, you can still mix your coins with Wasabi Wallet, but the wallet company itself is not the one doing the mixing. So they basically have a different types of people that you can use to mix it with, and so that way they're doing it to protect themselves. So the feds can go after Wasabi and say, "Why are you mixing coins?" As far as Samurai goes, Samurai is a different story. They actually caught the guys who were doing Samurai. They caught the people who were running Samurai Wallet, the developers behind it, and they took Samurai Wallet off of the Google Play Store and off of iOS. And so the feds are now prosecuting them for mixing coins because they're saying that they advertised it as this is a way you could conceal, where you got your coins from. And it's a very delicate balance because privacy is a right, but then you don't want to go out there and promote privacy as a way to cover up a crime. That's a distinction, and that's I think why the Samurai guys got caught. And I think that they shouldn't be prosecuted because they didn't actually do anything illegal. All they're doing is running software. And to me, running software shouldn't be considered illegal.
When you're saying mixing, what is that exactly?
Yeah.
What is the coin mixing? What is that entitles to?
So basically, you're taking your coins and 100 other people are taking their coins, and you're sending them through these other wallets, and then you're getting back coins. Almost the same amount that you sent, but you're getting back different coins than the ones that you actually sent. So it's difficult to track where they went. So
it's
through.
like almost a money laundering.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
It's
or
funny.
Coin laundering.
Money laundering. It's funny because that's what they call it, money laundering, and. We can go into a whole thing about money laundering, but I read this paper. I think it was written back in like 2008. So it was before Bitcoin when this paper came out, where this guy was saying that basically he was trying to make an argument. I wish I could remember the name of the author, but he was making this argument that money laundering isn't really a crime because there's no victim, and basically it's not. It shouldn't. He was arguing that money laundering shouldn't be illegal, and the reason why they made it illegal is because drug dealers were using banks, and they were saying, "Oh, drug dealers are using banks, therefore, we have to spy on everyone who's using a bank." However, his argument was, well, drug dealers also drive cars. Does that mean there's something wrong with driving a car? Drug dealers use cell phones. Does that drug dealers buy houses? Is there something wrong with buying a house? So his argument was just because people, criminals use some technology doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that technology. But I'm not going to get into it. The law is what it is. I can't change the law, so I'm going to follow the law. It is what it is. Yeah, it's kind of
recently,
like money laundering.
There's a bank that was actually laundering for the cartels.
Absolutely. There's a lot of this that happens, which is funny. Every time you have a politician like Senator Elizabeth Warren who says that Bitcoin is used for criminals, and then then we always find all these stories about banks that are laundering, money for criminals, and it's like when they do it, they don't go to prison. They just pay a fine, which is like a fraction of what the money that they actually made. I've never been the person to jump on this and say, aha, you should always, you should go after these guys for money laundering, because again, I'm kind of the philosophy from that guy that I read in 2008, where it's like money laundering, it shouldn't be illegal because there's no actual criminal act in money laundering. You're concealing where your funds came from.
Yeah.
So to me, that's not something that by itself should be considered illegal, but that's how the law interprets it.
The government wants to know where you got it. That's the taxes.
Yeah.
I think the main concern is tax.
It's taxes. That's it, because they want their piece out of it as well.
Not the actual crime of it, but, you took $1 billion or $1 million or whatever it might be. They didn't get a cut. It's like, you're cheating the middle guy, right? So
taxes is part of it. It's not the only reason why, but taxes is definitely part of it. But yeah, they want to get their cut. But a lot of times I've heard of stories where people have paid all their taxes on all the Bitcoin trades that they did, but they still got prosecuted because the feds looked at their tax returns like, how is this person making $300,000 a year, doing this Bitcoin stuff? Let's look further into it. And then they found some transaction where some of the money, was sent to a drug market. They're like, aha, this person's involved in drugs, even though they had nothing to do with that transaction. So even paying the taxes and doesn't necessarily save you. So it's a tricky game, but we have to live within the rules that we are given. We don't have to like them. We can disagree with them, but we have to live within the rules. So if I was running a wallet, I wouldn't go out there and tell people, use my wallet because you can hide where your funds came from. I would say, if you're interested in privacy, use my wallet. Now, if somebody went to me directly and said, hey, I got funds from a drug sale, I'm trying to hide it, I'll be like, well, this person's a Fed. And I would be like, yeah, this person's doing something illegal. So they're trying to set you up, But it's funny because they've done, it depends on who you ask, because they've done studies on people who use Bitcoin. They're like 99% of it is not used in anything illegal. It's just people doing regular, either trades or buying and selling stuff. It has nothing to do with anything illegal. But then there's other people who are saying, oh, this is all used for criminal activity. And it's all nonsense. It's just not true. They're trying to make it, they're trying to basically promote themselves saying, hire us to go and track Bitcoins for you, and they can't track it. They're lying. They're actually making up the fact that they can track Bitcoins, because Bitcoins, in theory, you could track them, but it's probabilistic. Like, you can say this is probably that person's Bitcoin. You can put a percentage probability on, like there's 80% this is that person's Bitcoin, but you can't prove that that's what it is. It's basically a probabilistic thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of taxes, I want to ask you, since there's election coming up, is it going to affect the Bitcoin, or is it? What's your standpoint?
Sure. There's a lot of Bitcoiners who previously were apolitical, or they weren't getting involved politically, who have come out and are actively campaigning and promoting Donald Trump. There's other people who like Bitcoin, who are actively campaigning against Donald Trump. And one of the reasons why some people don't like Donald Trump is because he's making a mistake that a lot of people make, where they think of Bitcoin as being one of many. There's all these different coins. We kind of touched on that before we started recording, but there's all these different coins, and Donald Trump is creating one of them and is saying, or he's helping to promote one of his coins. And it's like, well, that's a scam. Why is Donald Trump promoting a scam? So there's some people who don't like Donald Trump for that reason. I think Donald Trump realized he made a mistake when he was president, because I think it was 2019, he made a tweet where he said that he's not a fan of Bitcoin. He doesn't like Bitcoin. And I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I've never voted for Donald Trump, but and not that I like any of his opponents either. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. But I just thought that when I saw that tweet, I'm like, this is a mistake, because there's nobody that dislikes Donald Trump that is suddenly going to vote for him because he said something bad about Bitcoin, right? There's no Donald Trump hater who also hates Bitcoin, and it's like, oh, Donald Trump hates Bitcoin too. Okay, now I like him. Now I'm going to vote for him. So he's not going to gain any votes by doing that. But he's got people who like Bitcoin and are fans of Donald Trump, and they're going to be like, oh, Donald Trump doesn't like Bitcoin. No, maybe I don't like him anymore. Maybe I don't want to show up to vote for him.
But will that, other than just to vote, but will that affect, let's say, for example, if it's a party that is anti Bitcoin or anti-coins or crypto especially, because that can make a huge difference in the crypto market because they can come in and say, hey, you know what, we're making crypto illegal in the United States. You cannot trade, you cannot hold, you cannot do anything. Just like other countries where they actually had banned the trade of Bitcoins and all coins together. So that, do you see anything like that happening in the United States?
So there's two. Okay, first of all, I don't think Bitcoin will be banned in the United States. And the reason why I don't think that is because even though we don't really follow the Constitution, there seems to be one amendment to the Constitution that the Supreme Court actually takes seriously. That's the First Amendment. And Bitcoin would be protected under the First Amendment because basically what it boils down to is code. Bitcoin is code. And all you're doing is you're broadcasting code. And whether someone has any meaning attached to that code or not, or someone has any value attached to that code is irrelevant. The government cannot stop you from broadcasting code. So to me, I've never been worried that the government is going to ban Bitcoin. What they could do to make it a little difficult is to say put a tax on Bitcoin mining. To me, I think that's still unconstitutional. I think that if the government did pass like a specific tax, an extra tax on Bitcoin mining, I think that would probably fail a constitutional test. And the reason why is because all the miner has to do is go to court and argue, all I'm doing is using my computer to guess numbers. And that's all Bitcoin mining is you're guessing numbers. And how can you put a tax on someone guessing a number and guessing a number and guessing a number? And eventually, they may get a number right and they'll win. They'll get some Bitcoin. But the act of guessing using electricity to guess a number, you can't tax that act as there's no transaction going on. So I'm not too worried about that. Now, there's another philosophy which says we want the government to come after Bitcoin. We want the government to try to ban Bitcoin, to do their best to come after Bitcoin, to harm Bitcoin. And the reason why is because that will make Bitcoin stronger. It'll make it more resistant to government attacks. Whereas if the government is quote unquote favorable to Bitcoin, that could cause some problems because now the government is endorsing Bitcoin and we're accepting government help to promote Bitcoin, but that help doesn't come free. That help comes with strings attached. Now the government says, okay, now we want you to change the code. We want you to make an adjustment to the code because we don't like the fact that there's a limit to the number of Bitcoins that can be mined. We think we should make more of them. And because we've accepted all this subsidy and help from the government, now we're kind of have to go along with it. So there's different philosophies. To me, I don't think much. I'm not too worried about what the government will do to try to either attack Bitcoin or help Bitcoin. I think both of those will kind of, in the end, it won't have much of an effect. My concern is more like if I was to think about threats to Bitcoin, the threat to Bitcoin to me, if it's coming from the government or say some other person who wants to harm Bitcoin, say someone like some of the banks or something like that, or the Federal Reserve, to me, it would seem to be like the threat would be in some way convincing Bitcoiners that what they're doing is not an attack, like it's they're helping Bitcoin. I know that's just kind of getting way too deep into the rabbit hole philosophically, but it's like if you can do an attack and everyone can see that it's an attack, we'll respond to it. So it's not a threat. But if you could do an attack and there's people who are saying, oh, this is not an attack. This is helping Bitcoin. It's helping making more money for miners because we're changing something and the miners are getting richer because of it. To me, that's a dangerous part because if you can't recognize an attack, that's when it becomes dangerous. Like there's no such thing as a fair fight. Like a fair fight doesn't exist in nature. It's always going to be like one animal or one being or one life form has a unique advantage over another one and is able to ambush it or attack it in a way that they can't defend themselves. So to me, that's the danger is if I was to think about a threat to Bitcoin, whoever gets elected, that's not going to matter. Now, I will say this, not that you guys asked, but I would rather Donald Trump win. And I don't know if I'm going to vote in this election because I'm still registered in New Hampshire, so I haven't actually updated my registration for California. But if I do end up registering and voting, it might even be too late. I don't really even know. I would vote for Donald Trump, and it's not because I like Donald Trump or because I think he's smart or because I think he's he's going to make good decisions. None of that stuff. The only reason why I would prefer Donald Trump is because of one reason and one reason only, and that's because Donald Trump said that as soon as he gets into office again, he's going to gonna free this guy Ross Ulbricht, who's serving a life sentence. Now, I don't know Ross Ulbricht personally. I actually did talk to him on the phone once, very briefly, for like just a second, just to say hello to him from prison. I know his mother pretty well because after he got caught by the feds. I reached out and I started communicating with his mother. So I know Ross Ulbricht's mother, Lynn, pretty well, and I'm hoping that he gets out of prison. He got arrested in 2013 for running a website called the Silk Road, which was a darknet market. People call it a drug website. It was like a place you could buy and sell drugs, which is. It's sort of true, but again, it's not true because you could buy and sell other things too. It was a free market website. Yeah. You could use Bitcoin to buy and sell things, and people bought books and they bought T-shirts, and people bought mushrooms and weed. It was mostly weed and mushrooms, I think, originally when the website first started. But then as the website went on, and more police started using the website.
Using the drugs or using the website?
Using the website. Using the website, harder and harder stuff got on there. So then they started selling heroin at some point.
Wow.
But to me, it was a free market
was
website.
It an open platform?
There were certain things that were restricted. So certain things anything that could be used to hurt someone was banned. So you couldn't buy and sell weapons. You couldn't buy and sell stolen credit card numbers. You couldn't buy and sell counterfeit money, but say other things were allowed. Say fake IDs were allowed, because the argument was, well, fake IDs. You say, well, fake ID could be used to hurt someone. It's like, no, well, fake ID could be used by, say, someone who's trying to flee like an oppressive country. They're trying to flee North Korea or something like that. They may use a fake ID to try to get out of that country. So in theory, a fake ID could be used for good. So the argument was fake IDs are okay, counterfeit dollars are not okay. Anything that weapons are not okay. So to me, like, the website had rules. They had rules that you had to follow. It was like, as long as something can't be used to hurt someone, then it's okay. So if you're someone who likes to smoke weed, not me, but other people like that. If you want to buy some, and keep in mind, this was like back in 2011, where it was basically illegal everywhere. So nowadays, weed and mushrooms are they're less and less illegal now.
You could go down the street and buy it.
Yeah, and I think that the way that he was prosecuted was kind of unfair, because nobody else who's done what he did faced the same consequences. Like, to me, it's like, okay, you didn't like his website, okay, but he wasn't the one who was buying and selling the drugs. Other people were. So to me, it was like, if you're going after, say, Craigslist, because the guy who runs Craigslist, because somebody was selling something illegal on Craigslist, to me that to me the legal theory didn't make sense. And also the life sentence, they were trying to act like they charged him with the kingpin charge. So they were trying to say, well, he was like El Chapo or someone like that. Like, no, he was the manager of a website, and they used that against him, because if there was dispute between a buyer and a seller on the website, they tried to use that to make it seem like he was in charge of this criminal organization. So to me, it was a huge over prosecution, and hopefully he's able to get out, because right now, if nothing changes, he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life, and I don't think that's fair.
Wow. Same thing happened with Backpage. Where they prosecute him for prostitution, which he had nothing to do with prostitution. It's just people put their own stuff, and there was drugs on Craigslist. There's people selling drugs on Craigslist.
Facebook, there's people selling
everywhere.
There's codes. I heard that there's like certain codes and stuff like that they use. I was watching the special online where they're actually using, let's say if it's mushrooms, they might put whatever it might be. They give like creative names to it, and they put the dollar amounts and so on and so forth. And people who are interested in doing drugs, they know the codes. Yeah, absolutely. And they just go in and buy it. But nobody has done anything to Craigslist so far.
Yeah,
but,
because it's just completely unfair. It was government that didn't like Bitcoin. One particular politician in particular was the one who didn't like Bitcoin and didn't like that website, Silk Road. And he kind of his friends were the prosecutors and his friend was the judge, and it was completely rigged. And I could say that because I was actually at the trial. I actually showed up. It was in New York City in the federal court in New York City in Manhattan. And at the time I was still living in LA. This was back in 2015, and I was like I was emailing back and forth with Ross's mother, and she was like saying, well, if you can fly out from LA to New York City for the trial, the trial was expected to last about a month. I was like, well, I can't go for a month, but I'll be there for like, the first few days. So I was there for the first few days of the trial. And actually, I mentioned this to Ross when I spoke to him briefly on the phone. I said, yeah, I was at your trial. Like I was there for the first 2 days or first 3 days. And he was like, and he remembers his trial pretty well because he was like, yeah, the first 3 days, the trial was going really good for me. I'm like, yeah, it went really bad right after that. But yeah, but the beginning of the trial, it looked like the defense was going to be able to get this case basically completely thrown out. But then they had a long weekend. It was like Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. So they were off on Friday. So Thursday was like the last day. And then they were off on Friday because the court was doing something else. And then Monday was also a holiday. And then by the time they came back on Tuesday, I don't know what had happened, but it seemed like all of the defense's arguments were being thrown out because somehow the prosecution had said, look, if you let the defense bring up all these other things, we're not going to be able to convict them. So that's how federal court is. Federal court, I mean, state criminal court is a little bit more fair. I feel like federal court is just completely rigged in favor of the prosecution. This is why if you're prosecuted in federal court, it's like something like 1% chance that you're going to be found not guilty, whereas in state court it's a little bit higher. It's like,
so you don't want to go to federal
yeah,
court.
you definitely don't want, and especially not that federal court in New York City. It's funny because when I was there in New York City for the trial, I was there, and some of us were protesting outside the courthouse, and this guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey, what are you guys here for?" We're here to support Ross Ulbricht, who's on trial. He's like, man, I've worked in this building for 20 years. I've seen so much corruption in this building for the last. I've been working in this building since 1994, and I've seen so much evil and corruption coming out of these halls. So it's like I saw it firsthand. I saw how corrupt it was.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What about let's say Bitcoin, right? The mechanism and everything else. There's a lot of other coins now,
sure,
like
absolutely.
meme coins and all that stuff, right? So like Sheep and stuff, Doge, which a lot of people made a lot of money.
Sure,
they became rich because it's cheap, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about the future of those coins? What do you think? What kind of chances they have surviving, let's say in the next 5 years or 10 years?
Will there be another Bitcoin? Huh?
Yeah, could there be another Bitcoin? So to me, I think I'm operating on the assumption that Bitcoin is the one shot. If Bitcoin fails, this whole space fails. This is the assumption I'm operating on. Yeah. And to me, these other coins, like when I first, got interested in Bitcoin and I saw that there was these other coins, I wasn't really interested in any of them, but I didn't think that there was anything necessarily, wrong with trying to invest in some of them and try to make some money. The goal was always to make more money so that you can buy more Bitcoin. So, so the ultimate goal was to buy more Bitcoin. And occasionally you do get one or two coins that pump greater than Bitcoin. And it's easy to look in hindsight and say, during this time period to this time period, this coin pumped higher than Bitcoin. But it's easy to do that in hindsight because in hindsight, everyone already knows about Shibu or Ethereum or whatever that coin is. But it's almost impossible to predict that ahead of time. How would you know ahead of time that Elon Musk was going to suddenly start promoting Doge, and then Doge was going to come from being basically a dead project, where the guy who created the project completely walked away from it, and a lot of the people who were fans of that project had already given up on it and moved on to other things. And then after that, and back when it was nothing, it was worth below what it was worth when it launched. Suddenly, it all of a sudden pumps again, and of course, it's going to go down again. So I would say I am not. If I'm going to gamble, I'll gamble. I'll bet on sports. That's what I'm good at. I can actually make money betting on sports. But I'm not good enough to be able to guess which coin is going to pump, and it's always temporary. None of these coins are sustainable. The one coin that everyone was telling me was going to do better than Bitcoin, that one's a joke now, which is Ethereum. Ethereum, for the longest time, we were hearing about how Ethereum was going to eventually surpass Bitcoin, and first of all, I thought that if Ethereum surpassed Bitcoin, I thought that would have been good for Bitcoin because it would have been a test for Bitcoin's long-term stability. So I was like, hell, if Ethereum somehow surpasses Bitcoin, I'd be happy about that as a Bitcoiner because I'd be like, okay, now we're going to be going through a test. Now, unfortunately for me, it looks like that's never going to happen. Like no one's even considering that Ethereum is going to surpass Bitcoin now. Yeah. All the good news that happened with Ethereum, they had their own ETF and this, and if you just look, because this because all the Ethereum people, they're only comparing the price of ETH against dollars. They're never comparing it to Bitcoin, because if you compare it to Bitcoin, it looks like this. Compared to a dollar, like, oh, we reached an all-time high. Yeah, you reached.
What was the all-time high on it?
I don't remember.
$3,000 or 37.
It may have been $4,000 in dollar terms, but that's not the important. That's not the important number. The important number is what was the all-time high against Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and that was like back in, I don't know what year was it, 2016 or 2017. And even when it hit its quote unquote all-time high back in 2020 or 2021, it didn't come close to its all-time high in Bitcoin. So it was a fake all-time high. It's an all-time high compared to dollars. But if you had just held Bitcoin, you would have done better. So to me, the reason why I think that all these other coins are basically scams, or either scams or useless, is because they're not Bitcoin and they cannot replicate what Bitcoin did. So first of all, if your argument is that it's money, if Bitcoin is money, which is what I believe, some people may disagree with that, but I think Bitcoin is money. It's a store of value, and you can use it as a medium of exchange. And although most people don't use it as a unit of account, in theory you could use it as a unit of account, and it is used as a unit of account in, say, mining, because mining is priced in Bitcoin, not in dollars. So to me, if it's money, if your argument is Bitcoin is money, then money to me is not a company. It's not like saying, well, you want a monopoly on Bitcoin, because no, money is not a company. Bitcoin is not a company. It's not a monopoly. If we're all speaking the same language, that doesn't mean there's a monopoly on language. It just means that we're all using the same standards. So like if you go into, say, a hardware store and you want to buy nuts and bolts, now they may be sold by different companies. You may have tools at home that are sold by different companies, but all those nuts and bolts and tools, they all kind of fit together, not because it's the same company. They may be 6 different companies that you buy the tools for, but they all work together because they're all following the same standards. So to me, money is a standard. So if you're saying that there's going to be competition on money, to me that means you don't have money. If there's competition on standards, that means you don't have a standard. So So right now, say if you want to speak to somebody in, say, India, most likely they'll be able to speak English, and that's a good thing. Now, if they are speaking a different language and you're speaking a different language, that's an inefficiency. So the benefit of money is that it gains efficiency. If everyone's using their own money, we lose the benefit of money. It's no longer money. Now we're back to barter, and barter is bad because barter doesn't allow you to have a smooth transaction with somebody. So the reason why I think Bitcoin is different from everything else, and the first reason is because it's a standard. It's not a company. So money will converge on one standard. So you don't want to be the one that's using the bad money, because if you're the one that's caught using the bad money, you're going to be enslaved by the people who are using the good money. And there's an actual real world example of this. This actually happened in Africa, as people talking about slavery in Africa. In Africa, they used glass beads. They use them now today for decorative purposes, but back then in Africa, hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago, they were used as money in Africa because these glass beads were difficult to make. It was scarce. It was hard to make these glass beads and trade them for money. You couldn't just make them easily. And then what happened is that the Europeans came to Africa and they saw that, the locals were using these glass beads. And they're like, wait a minute, we can make this stuff in Europe pretty cheaply, pretty easily. So they made a whole bunch of glass beads and they started showing up to Africa. And this is how the slave trade basically started, is they could buy off the locals and basically get them to help them, capture more slaves and get slave labor. So eventually those glass beads became known as slave money, because if you were using the bad money, you ended up being owned by the people who were using the good money. So to me, I want Bitcoin because I don't want to be stuck using the bad money. So if I'm using something, say Shiba Inu, sure, I may get a nice pump and I may be able to make more money in a short term because there's a hype cycle going around it, but I don't want to get stuck holding the bag when everyone else is already sold off and everyone else has moved on to the next pump and dump. And that's number one reason. The second reason is because we touched on this earlier, but I said for the first, say, 13, 14 months of its existence, Bitcoin didn't have any value. And that's not possible today. If I launch a coin today, it's gonna have a marketing team behind it. I'm gonna be behind it. I'm gonna make a website. I'm gonna recruit a bunch of people. I'm gonna recruit some celebrities to go promote this coin. It's gonna have a value right away, and it's gonna have a centralized marketing team and a centralized website and a centralized development team behind it from the beginning. And so there's gonna be price from day one. Or let's say I don't do that. Let's say I just create it in private and I don't tell anybody about it. no one's going to hear about it. It's still, no one's going to hear about it, and it's not going to take off because I'm making some coin off on my own, and I'm not promoting it. I'm not telling anybody about it. No one's going to hear about it. So Bitcoin was unique because for the first, over a year of its existence, it had no value, and it had nobody pumping. It had no marketing team behind it. It had no, celebrities being paid to go on late night TV and promote this crap. So to me, because of these two main reasons, and maybe a few other ones, you can't really replicate Bitcoin. You cannot go to how it started and do it again. It just doesn't work. It's like if you see a magic trick and you've already seen that magic trick. You can't see that magic trick for the first time again, ever again. To me, this is why I've never. I shouldn't say never, because at one point I was kind of interested in these other coins like Ethereum and things like that. But at some point I realized, you know what? I'm not really good enough to guess which coin is going to pump next. So I'm not going to waste my time and my energy to do that. I'm just going to buy Bitcoin. Now I could sleep at night because I don't have to worry about it. If I wake up in the morning, I found out that the other coin that I bought, crashed in price and it went to zero. I don't have to worry about that. I can
40% down, 30% down, 20.
Yeah. So to me, it's like I'll have some gray hairs, but I'll have fewer gray hairs if I just stick to Bitcoin and I can sleep at night and not have to worry about what the market does while I'm.
What I did? This is during the pandemic. When everybody was like going into Bitcoins and all that stuff, and because I had no idea what Bitcoin was, what Dogecoin was. I bought Dogecoin accidentally because it was on Robinhood, and I just put some money in there. Next morning, it just coincidentally pumped up, right?
There you go.
But also with Shiba. What I was doing is I was buying like these random coins, right? And one of them was Shiba, and I was putting $30 in each coin. I said, you know what? Like you said, you can't guess, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen.
You separate your.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to put $300. And I spread it across 10 different coins, $30, because when you're buying $30, it's like 20 million, 40 million, 60 million, and then there was this one other coin that was called Moon something, and which went out of
Safe Moon,
yeah. Which went out of business, which I had there, but I was putting such a little amount. But what happened was, one morning I opened it up, and it was like $3,000 in there. I was like, what the hell happened? It's like, is this a mistake? Because in one of my Coinbase, one time I had $4 billion. Because
overnight billionaire, right here.
There you go.
I don't know if it was Doge or like Shiba that had like a glitch in it, and it went up, and then I opened it. It was like $4 billion. So I was a billionaire for one day.
Couple hours.
A couple hours. I was like,
data error.
That's a transfer.
Billionaire for a day.
I could have transferred anybody, just like the Chase Bank stuff. But that was the thing, that you can't really make an intelligent, I think, guess even to know what's happening, because it's a community. Everything is now so marketing, like you said, because people used to tell me about Bitcoin. But it sounded so foreign to me. I'm like, how the hell can you farm? When they were talking about farming, numbers, digits. And I was like, dude, I had like family members that were telling me, buy Bitcoin, it's going to be crazy. I'm like, man, how the hell, you can't even see the coin. Yeah. There's not an actual, there's not tangible thing your hand.
I told a mutual friend of ours to buy Bitcoin in 2013. And then he contacted me, somebody that and he contacted me later saying, oh, hey, I just bought a whole bunch of Doge. I'm like, okay, you completely missed what I told you. Sorry, go ahead, Greg. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say the same thing. Like, if it's not tangible, I will never buy it. Yeah, I'll put a couple of $100 here and there. Maybe it will go up later on. I know you're in Bitcoin. I know you're in all that.
No, I've heard this argument before, actually. The not tangible thing. To me, it's like we actually value things that are not tangible more than tangible things sometimes. And I'll give you an example. So I was talking to somebody who was making a similar argument that you're saying, well, it's if I can't hold it, if I can't touch it, it's not really, I can't really value it. And I'm like, well, let me ask you this. I'm like, you have an iPhone? And she's like, yeah, I have an iPhone. I'm like, okay. So if you lose your iPhone, what are you more worried about? Are you worried about the actual phone itself? Like if you could get back the phone, but without any of the data on the phone, or you would rather get the data but not the phone. Which one would you prefer? She's like, oh, it's not even close. Obviously, I wouldn't care about the phone. I can go, but pay a few $100s, buy another phone. The data is more valuable to me on the phone. I'm like, so you kind of understand why something that's not tangible, something that's just ones and zeros on a circuit, would be more valuable than, say, something that's physical. So in a sense, we all kind of get this. We all kind of understand this. But yeah, the fact that Bitcoin doesn't exist in the real world, it's a problem for some, but not for other people. It's like other people will say, for example, okay, well, I have airline miles. That's not tangible. Or it used to be, not so much anymore, but it used to be, I have phone minutes. I have 600 minutes minus nights and weekends or something like that. That was a thing at one point. And the minutes. I could roll them over or something, so that wasn't really something tangible, but people did value it. So in a sense, you can understand how something is intangible. And I could tell you real quickly, because maybe I had a similar reaction to you when I first heard about Bitcoin. But to the reason why I wasn't really on board right away wasn't the tangible and intangible thing, wasn't really what made me stay away from it originally, because at the time I've never been like a video game person, but at the time I was playing this game called Raz, which is like it's a poker game. It's a type of poker game online. I was playing Raz online, and I was actually making money like on PokerStars playing Raz. And the reason why I was making money online playing Raz was because most people didn't know how to play the game. So it wasn't like I was smarter than everyone else. It was just like I knew the game, and most people had never heard of the game and they didn't understand it. So I was like able to make money online playing Raz. But then the government back in 2011 shut down all the U.S. poker sites. So when I went to work the next day, and I was saying, well, what can I do to make money online now that I can't play, I can't play Raz online? And I was thinking to myself, maybe I can play a video game or something, because I heard it's possible to make money playing video games online. And I was like, well, I heard it's possible to farm gold playing World of Warcraft online. I've never been a World of Warcraft player, so I didn't really know anything about the game. But I heard it's possible to make money playing World of Warcraft, and I was talking to my friends at work, and they were saying, yeah, there's people who make money playing World of Warcraft online. They're in China, they're sitting in these sweatshops, and they have these computers in front of them, and they play World of Warcraft all day farming gold, and they take that gold that they farm in the game and they sell it to Americans for dollars, and they get dollars and they get the gold, so that the Americans can save their time. They don't have to grind for hours and hours. They can just take their money because their time is more valuable than their money, and they'll pay these people in China who are working in sweatshops. They get the World of Warcraft gold and they get the dollars. So I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound like something I want to do to make money. So and then someone else came up to me and was like, hey, there's something. People are using their computers' processing power and their electricity to generate this virtual currency. I don't even remember if the guy told me Bitcoin or not, but he was like saying something about they're using their computer's power. And I was like, oh, is this currency worth anything? And there's like, not really. It's not really worth much. It's like, okay, but they're using their dollars to buy electricity and use their computer's processing power to generate this virtual currency. Like, are they selling it? Like, I don't understand. Are they selling it for dollars? Like, some people are, but it's not really profitable. I was like, then why are they doing it? He's like, because they think that it's going to be worth more in the future. And I was like, okay, that sounds ridiculous to me. Like the first person who approached me about Bitcoin was talking to me about it like it was a money-making scheme. Like, oh, go use your computer to generate this funds. And I also didn't understand how he said it was limited. He's like, it's a limited supply. I'm like, well, it's virtual. How is it limited? Like, because like airline miles aren't limited, right? World of Warcraft gold isn't limited. The company that runs that server, they can type in whatever number they want. They can make a whole bunch of more gold, or they can add a whole bunch of million airline miles to your account with like nothing. I'm like, why? I didn't understand why you would need to use processing power and how it was limited. Can't you just copy it? They're like, well, people are trying to copy it, but it's not really the same thing. So to me, I didn't really understand it, because it was explained to me like as a way to make money online, rather than like, I wish it had been explained to me as like a sound money. Because our money, the reason why I'm interested in Bitcoin is because our money is not sound. We went off of the gold standard. A lot of people still to this day think that their money is backed by gold. You probably run into this too. We went off of the gold standard when Nixon took us off of the gold standard back in 71. So 71 was when Nixon, if you can actually watch this video on YouTube right now, you go to YouTube, you type in, Nixon takes us off the Bretton Woods, you can see Nixon's speech. And he says, I think the dollar is strong, or something like that. And I want to make sure our dollar remains strong. So I'm going to take us off of the the Bretton Woods system temporarily. So it was always temporary.
Yeah.
Like they never do it. And then of course it was not temporary. Once once you were off of the gold standard, that's it. You can never get back on again. You know,
they changed, it never goes back.
Exactly.
You know,
You cannot go back. This is a one-way street going off of the gold standard, because even say in theory, let's say you do go back on the gold standard, no one's going to believe it, because like, oh, they're just going to go off the gold standard again next time. You know, so even if they were to somehow go back, it still would be, once you cross that bridge, it's done. So if I wish it had been explained to me, Bitcoin had been explained to me as, say, this is a way where the money, because right now, I mean, you're in insurance, so you understand this. Right now, if you make money, you can't save it in that money. You have to buy something. You have to buy stocks. You have to buy mutual funds. You have to buy insurance. So you cannot, it doesn't matter what your job is. If you're an engineer, if you're an airline pilot, if you're a heart surgeon, whatever your job is, you have to have a second job. Your second job is you're an investor, which is the reason why and most of us, it's been like that for 50 plus years. Most of us think it's normal. But that's not normal. You should be able to earn your money, do what you do for a living, do what you're an expert at, be an engineer or whatever it is that you're an expert at, and make your money and save your money and money, not have to have a second job where you're trying to guess which stock or which crypto is going to go up so you can put your money where it's not going to lose value to inflation. And to me, that's where Bitcoin is different from everything else. Bitcoin is saving. Bitcoin, I don't even want to call it an investment. It's not an investment. The idea is that it's a savings. Now, of course, people make fun of me when I say that, because they're like, "Well, what do you mean savings?" Because it was worth, 70,000, or it was worth 69,000, and then it was worth $18,000 per coin after that. So it's not really saving. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's stuff. That's what the market's opinion is of the price. So you can't control that. But if you look at the fundamentals of Bitcoin, as in if you look at the actual mining power that's behind it, that's really been going up. And I think we're at an all-time high. We may not be an all-time high in terms of the Bitcoin price when it comes to dollars, but we're at an all-time high or close to an all-time high of how much energy is being used to generate Bitcoins by these big mining farms. So to me, that's something that is within Bitcoin. And so that's what kind of got me interested in Bitcoin, is there was a way that you could have money where you didn't have to worry that somebody else was going to, inflate the money away. There's no way for another company. No one's in charge of Bitcoin. This is the thing that blows people's minds, is no one's in charge of it. There's no company. There's no CEO behind it.
Do you really think so, though? Is there? I mean, I feel like...
Me personally, I don't.
I
think somebody has to be behind it.
There is some force, right? Because, I mean, why would government...
Somebody has to control it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. You could say that about Ethereum, because, say, for Ethereum, there's like one guy and there's like the Ethereum Foundation, and whatever they say goes. If they want to change a rule in Ethereum, whatever they say, nobody can really disagree with them, because Ethereum, they don't even have mining anymore. Ethereum got rid of their mining. Bitcoin's not like that. You could hold a lot of Bitcoin. You could hold 1 million Bitcoin, and you have no say in what happens to Bitcoin. You have no say in the code. You have no say in the mining. If you want to mine, you have to buy mining equipment and run and mine like a business.
Can you still mine Bitcoin, or is it because of the limitations?
Well, people can still mine. It's really hard. It's getting harder and harder to mine, but people can still mine. People, contact us. They want to set up a home miner, so we can help them do that. Most likely, you're just going to be doing it as a hobby. You're not really going to be doing it as business. If you do want to do mining as a business, what you need to do is you need to find a cheap form of electricity source. You can either make your own, and I know miners who are doing this.
Or your neighbors.
Or you can steal someone's, yeah. Although, don't steal, don't steal electricity.
No wonder my electricity bill is so high.
Your neighbor has like a $3,000 bill.
No, you could no. In theory, you could say, let's say you live in a college dormitory where you're not paying the electricity bill. In theory, you could plug in your miner there, and you could get
somebody's going to come after you.
Eventually, someone's going to notice. So or they're going to kick you out or something, or they're going to. So yeah, somebody's going to notice. In fact, yeah. But here's the thing: no one's in charge of it, because we know no one's in charge of it because of something that happened in 2017. Now, this was a very important moment in Bitcoin. Most people who are outside of Bitcoin don't even know about this, but there was something called the fork wars, which happened in Bitcoin in 2017. And what happened there was that something like 90% of the mining power and about 50 of the biggest companies in Bitcoin, I'm talking exchanges, I'm talking hardware companies, wallet companies, mining companies, mining pools. There's like something like 50 of the biggest companies in Bitcoin got together, and they all decided that they wanted to raise the block size. because they're like, well, the blocks are too small. They're saturated. There's, the fees are too high. We want to make the blocks bigger to ease some of this congestion in Bitcoin. And this is kind of, this is kind of getting past the scope of maybe this conversation. But the point is not whether or not the block should be big or small. The point is they weren't able to do it.
Yeah.
They weren't able to raise the block size, and they gave up eventually, and they canceled the plan. This was called the New York Agreement. You can probably look this up if you go online. If you type in New York Agreement Bitcoin, you can read all about it. Because I think there was another New York Agreement that was not related to Bitcoin, so just make sure it's New York Agreement Bitcoin. And they weren't able to do it. And to me, that proved to me in 2017, nobody is in charge of Bitcoin. Even all the biggest companies, all the biggest influencers, Coinbase was behind it, and Bitmain was behind it. The biggest exchange was behind it. The biggest crypto influencers were behind this change, and it still didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? And they've all come up with excuses. They said, "Oh, it didn't happen because this one mean person said this mean thing, and that's why it didn't happen." It's like, no, that's not why it didn't happen. The reason why it didn't happen is because Bitcoin, unlike any other coin, has a group of decentralized nodes. If you wanted to, Sarkis, you could spin up a Bitcoin node by just spending, say, a few $100s. You could take a few $100s. You have a reasonable internet connection. You need enough hard drive storage space, and you could basically spin up a Bitcoin node in your home, and you could download the entire Bitcoin blockchain onto your computer. It's I don't know, what is it close to? It's close to a terabyte now. But yeah, and it's 1 terabyte of storage space isn't that difficult. You could do it with a few $100s. You could do it with just like regular computer parts. And there was thousands of people who are running these Bitcoin nodes out of their homes, and you can't really tell all these people at once to change the code.
Yeah.
If the users were going along with your change, you could have easily changed it. This is why no one's in charge of Bitcoin. No one can tell these guys what to do. Now, that's not the case with Ethereum. Ethereum, there's like 1 or 2 companies that run nodes. You can't just spin up an Ethereum node unless you have like tens of thousands of dollars and you have specialized equipment that can download the Ethereum blockchain. It's impossible for like a regular person. You need like a huge server farm to be able to run an Ethereum node. And any other crypto. So the one thing that's different, I said there was 2 things. Well, this is the third thing, is Bitcoin is unique because you can relatively cheaply run a node from your home using, off-the-shelf computer equipment that is not specialized with a reasonable broadband internet connection. Yeah. And this is why no one's in charge of Bitcoin, because that's not the case for any other coin. And any other coin, if the leader of the coin says we're going to do this, that's what happens. And it's like, this is the first time in history where there's this something exists where there isn't somebody in charge that can screw it up. It's like everything else you can think of, whether it's, whatever technology you can think of or whatever, franchise it is you can think of.
Even the money right now we're doing.
Money.
Policies can change everything.
Policies can change. A wrong president can get elected. They could have a bad policy at the Federal Reserve. Nobody can actually change this thing without the users going along with it. And to me, this is why I said the threat to Bitcoin isn't someone attacking Bitcoin and being noticed as an attack. The threat to Bitcoin is complacency. If the nodes aren't paying attention, the big boys can change something, and the nodes, if they don't notice it, they'll go along with it. So to me, if I was to say what's a threat to Bitcoin, it's probably something that no one's talking about. It's not the government banning it. I think that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Even if it does happen, even worst case scenario, say the U.S. government does ban Bitcoin, it's not going to affect Bitcoin. Bitcoin will just move elsewhere. Just like when Russia, for the longest time, people forget this because now Russia is seen as pro-Bitcoin. But for the longest time, say from like 2014 to like 2018, Russia was anti-Bitcoin. They hated Bitcoin. And then they said, oh, once Russia bans Bitcoin, Bitcoin's going to die. And China was going to ban Bitcoin. And China banned Bitcoin probably 50 times. It's like every couple of months, some news story came out that China is banning Bitcoin. It's like every time the Bitcoin price pumped a little bit, China banned Bitcoin, it came down a little bit, and then it went up again. And finally, China said, no more mining. You can't mine in China anymore. And what happened? The mining, did it ruin mining? Well, mining took a little bit of a temporary dip, but all the mining equipment that was being used in China, a whole bunch of people in America got these cheap mining rigs. I was one of them. I actually got a few of them, and I was mining out of my apartment in New Hampshire. And
who was paying the bill?
I was paying the bill, but we had it wasn't too expensive. Not like in California. There's actually a nuclear power plant in New Hampshire, so it kind of and the energy market in New Hampshire is a little bit freer than it is here. So it wasn't really profitable, but it wasn't like crazy expensive either. But it's funny because even now, when quote unquote mining is banned in China, there's still mining going on in China. It's like you can't. It's like this thing that's like trying to ban water. You can't ban water. It just flows around it. You say no. Well, the water is no.
It's
good.
only the right people doing it. Not everybody. Average Joe is not doing it. It's just somebody that knows the government, like inside.
Yes, and that's kind of what happened in Iran for a while. Iran was actually pretty big in mining Bitcoin, and the reason why was because the mosques in Iran, they're like considered government so much, like they're government subsidized because it's like a theocracy, right? It's an Islamic republic. So the mosques in Iran had free electricity. So what these mosques were being used for was people were taking their miners and they were plugging them in. And at first the Iranian government was kind of okay with it. They're like, okay, fine, you can use the mosques to mine Bitcoin, but you have to sell it to us, and we'll you can't just dump it on the free market. We have to be the ones. So the Iranian government was buying it for like a discount and making a profit off of it. So the Iranian government was okay with it. But then, even though Iran has like all this oil and stuff, they kind of have these brownouts, these blackouts occasionally. So people were like blaming the miners for the brownouts. So they said, okay, no more mining in the mosques. But I don't even think it was the miners that was causing those brownouts, because it's a lot easier for a power company to supply electricity to a Bitcoin mining farm than it is to, say, a home. Because what a lot of people don't understand, if they're not into how power production works, is that they have to give you more than you need, because just in case, say you turn on your dryer and your refrigerator is running, and you start vacuuming and you turn on every appliance in the house at the same time, it's like more than what you're expected. But then you always have to have a little bit more electricity than you actually need. So there's a lot of wasted electricity. But if you're running if you're running a mining farm, the reason why these industrial mining farms are able to make a profit is because they can go to these power companies and they can say, listen, we need this much power. We're going to be running our miners 24/7. So it's not like you have to worry about varying usage. We're going to be day, night, we're going to be running our mining. So this is exactly how much power we need. We're going to run this equipment, and we don't need more or less. And this is why a lot of these mining farms are able to make a deal with power companies to get a cheap rate, is because, and it actually helps. And I don't necessarily think this is a great argument in favor of Bitcoin, but it is something that is true, which is it actually helps stabilize the power grid, because the power companies, they know that they have excess power, and so they're like, okay, we have excess power, we're going to let this mining farm use that excess power. But then let's say there's a crisis, let's say there's a bad storm or there's a heat wave or something, and the power is going to be, there's going to be higher demand for power. They can go to those miners and they say, okay, we need you to turn off your miners for a bit because there's an emergency going on. So these miners are actually helping to use wasted electricity that would have otherwise just gone to waste, and they're able to help stabilize the grid. And the power plant likes the miners because that they actually they're actually able to make more money because they're selling this otherwise wasted electricity to these miners. And actually, Norway, this is a very interesting thing because it kind of explains a lot of people who are environmentalists. They say they don't like Bitcoin mining because they think it's ruining the environment. And it's like, no, actually, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is going to save the environment. In Norway, I believe it was Norway. I may have to fact check me on this one, but I believe Norway, they banned Bitcoin mining. They said you can't use electricity for mining Bitcoin anymore. And they did this because they thought the energy was too expensive in Norway. It's like, oh, this will help save costs. After the ban, the price of electricity in Norway went up. And it was like, yeah, you guys, it wasn't the Bitcoin miners that was causing the electricity to spike. Actually, the Bitcoin miners was what causing the electricity to not be as expensive. So, and there's other uses of Bitcoin, like say you have a power source, but it's in a remote area, and it's too expensive to use that, say, geothermal power or say that hydroelectric power. It's too expensive to use that to run power lines and to take it to other places where there's people living because it's too far away. It's not cost effective. But now you can just go to that area, use that power source, and generate Bitcoins, and it's not wasted power. So to me, I think that Bitcoin is going to save humanity in several ways. One of them is by making our power usage and power consumption more efficient than it is now. Right now, there's a lot of wasted power that is, you can't use it. It's there, but nobody can use it because it's too remote. It's not close to a city. It's not cost effective to run power lines. So I think that one of the ways that humanity is going to be saved is by using more electricity, not using less. Okay, the people who think that we're going to help, humanity by banning the use of electricity, that doesn't make any sense. That's never happened in history. As more and more electricity usage has gone up, we've been better off. We've gotten wealthier. The economy has been better, and everything has improved as more electricity usage goes up. So we need to figure out ways to use more electricity, not less. So so while the money is going to be sound, and we're not going to be able to waste money on these things that don't make any sense, like starting up a new multi-billion-dollar tech company that's going to go out of business in 3 years because nobody, a whole bunch of investors threw money at it, but they're going to get their money back because they're going to be able to go to the government and get their close to the money printer. You can't do that with Bitcoin. You have to be careful where you invest your money because there's no more of it coming. It's a limited amount. Same thing with electricity. We're able to access electricity in remote areas, and there's going to be wealth created in, say, a remote village in Africa where they're close to a good power source, but they can't really use that power source for anything, But now that remote village can put in a Bitcoin miner and make a whole bunch of money for themselves and help improve their water, help improve their infrastructure. And there's just so many things. I'm so bullish on Bitcoin, and that has nothing to do necessarily with the price. We don't want to get into price predictions. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what Bitcoin's going to be worth more in the future.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, I think most likely over the long term it will be worth more, but who knows? To me, already as is right now, Bitcoin has already improved the world for the better. And one of the things that kind of got me interested in Bitcoin was, I don't know if you remember this, Sarkis, but do you remember the Cyprus bank bailing crisis of 2013? Do you remember this what happened in 2013? So what happened is that...
Sort of vaguely.
So yeah, in 2013, the Cyprus banks had a crisis, and they didn't have enough money. The government didn't have enough money. So what they said was, anyone who has more than, say, $100,000 or $200,000 saved in a bank account in Cyprus, in a savings account, we're going to go in, we're going to take a haircut off of it. We're going to take some of that money. And when that happened, I wasn't even interested in Bitcoin back then. I was like, well, that's not fair. It's like you saved a whole bunch of cash, and you're running a business, and you have $200,000 saved in your bank account. They're just going to come in and take 100,000 of it, or they're going to take 50,000 of it just because they've screwed up and they don't know how to balance their books. I'm like, and when this happened, Bitcoin went on this amazing tear because it went from, say, I don't know what it was before. Say it was like around $60. It went from like $60 a Bitcoin up to like over $200, almost $300 per Bitcoin, and then it came kind of back down to $80 again. But it still went on this huge pump when that story broke, and a lot of people got interested in Bitcoin after that. And the interesting thing is, I remember when this crisis happened, I remember people saying, well, you got to get used to this. This is something that's going to happen in America. It's going to happen in Europe. It's going to happen every few years. We're going to have one of these bank bailing crises because the governments are not good at managing their money. And eventually they're just going to go into the people's bank accounts and they're going to take their money. And I've noticed that this hasn't really happened. We've had other crises. We've had other, banking crises, but there really hasn't been a deliberate bank bail-in like there was in Cyprus. Yeah. And to me, the reason why is because Bitcoin is there. And no country, Canada, Mexico, no country wants to be known as the guy that went in and did the same thing Cyprus did, because then, now that everyone knows about Bitcoin, there's going to be this huge Niagara Falls waterfall of people rushing into Bitcoin saying, I want to keep control of my own funds. I don't want to put my money in the bank anymore. And nobody wants to do that. So to me, even Bitcoin right now, where it hasn't really taken over the world yet, I mean, it is pretty bigger than it was, but it hasn't really become the global standard currency yet. Even today, Bitcoin has already made the world a better place because it has prevented something from Cyprus from happening again. That's my theory, at least. Now, I'm not saying that it's never going to happen again. I do think eventually you are going to have something like Cyprus, the bank bail-in crisis happen again at some point. It's probably not going to be in America, but you never know.
Do you think if the stock market crashes, is the Bitcoin going to pump up? What's going to happen to that?
I think that any type of a crisis, whether it's a stock market crash or any type of a government crisis, will most likely temporarily cause Bitcoin to go down. And the reason why is because if you say you have a lot of your retirement account in the stock market and the stock market crashes, you may need to use, let's say you also have some Bitcoin saved up. You may need to use some of your Bitcoin, to help. Let's say you're already retired and you're relying on the funds in the stock market to help fund your lifestyle. So you may need to use some of your Bitcoin to pay for your expenses. So temporarily, I do think that if the market crashes, or you have some kind of a similar crisis, temporarily you may see the Bitcoin price go down. And this is why a lot of times when when we get some sort of report like inflation is at an all-time high or something in America, and then Bitcoin price crashes, and it's like, well, I thought Bitcoin was supposed to be an inflation hedge, or I thought Bitcoin was supposed to be a hedge against, say, volatility in the stock market. How come Bitcoin is going down too? And I think, to me, the short-term needs of, hopefully not, but let's say there's this big war in America, I think Bitcoin will probably crash, even though in the long term it's I hate to say this because I'm not a doom and gloomer. I want good things to happen. I don't want bad things to happen. In the long term, it might be good for Bitcoin because it'll cause people to eventually slowly go to Bitcoin. But in the short term, you have necessities. You need to you need to eat. You need power. So you may have to sell some of your Bitcoin to help pay for those things. Just like if a hurricane hits or an earthquake hits, you're going to need necessities. You're going to need to spend some of that stuff.
Especially when the economy is not good.
Right, when the economy is not good.
Right.
So when the economy is not good, a lot of times Bitcoin also takes a dip. Like with there was a crash that happened in March of 2020, right when the COVID insanity started. Bitcoin went from, where was it? I think it was like close to $7,000 or $8,000 per Bitcoin, and it crashed down to, in one day, like 3,500. And the funny thing is, it was going to keep crashing. It was actually going to continue down. I thought it was going to go all the way down to 1,000. That's what I thought in like one day, when like March 12th of 2020. March.
If it goes down, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it.
I'm going to buy 10 right now. So, but it was funny because I thought it was going to keep crashing. But then this one exchange called BitMEX went dark. Like their circuits, went dark. So the trading stopped. And once BitMEX turned off, I think somebody in BitMEX went to their servers and pulled the plug out because the Bitcoin price was crashing, and I think they were going to go.
This is prevented, basically.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's what happened, but to me, BitMEX definitely did stop working on March 13th or 12th of 2020.
Could be the process. There's so much coming
overloaded.
in, overloaded in the system.
But it's funny. As soon as BitMEX crashed, the price started going up.
Here's what when it comes to Bitcoin and digital currency and so on and so forth, right? Let's say, for example, we come into a situation where we don't have electricity, or we don't have a way of creating electricity, right? So not only you cannot mine, you cannot access. Let's say, especially if your money is on the platforms. Or let's say if you have it on the, let's say, disk or of whatever the drive, now if you can't really access it, how do you trade? How do you, you know what I mean? How do you transfer that to somebody else? That's one of my. This is like the worst case scenario. I don't think we're going to come there, but
it's a good question, and it kind of tells you a little bit about how I think about Bitcoin. This is why I don't speak for all Bitcoiners, but a lot of Bitcoiners out there are on, say, Twitter, and they're on YouTube, and they're rooting for a collapse. It's like, I want the economy to crash so that everyone uses Bitcoin, or I want the government to collapse so everyone will start using Bitcoin. And then it's like, I've never been that guy. I've never been someone to want a collapse.
That's a fanatic.
I've always been someone that I want there to be a Bitcoin standard, but I want it to be a smooth transition. I want it to be a smooth transition where slowly over time, more and more people start using Bitcoin, and then by the time Bitcoin has taken over, people don't realize that it's taken over. Everyone's already using Bitcoin, and it's already like the main standard. And most people still pretend like the dollar is king, but everyone's still, if you go to any business, doesn't matter what business it is.
It's artificial.
If you go to any business and whatever business it is, whether it's a fruit stand on the corner or whether it's some big corporation and you're hiring them for something, and you say, "Can I pay in Bitcoin?" and everyone's like, "Yeah, Bitcoin." And it's like, yeah, of course I'll take Bitcoin. Who doesn't take Bitcoin? So, but it's like we still pretend like the dollar is king. Now, if something like that happens, you're absolutely right. If the internet goes down, you'll have trouble using Bitcoin, but you'll have trouble with everything. You'll have trouble with getting clean water. You'll have trouble, getting electricity, like you mentioned.
Money will not matter at that point.
Money will matter, but because this is why a lot of the gold bugs tell me that a lot of the silver and gold people are like, don't buy Bitcoin. Buy
more
gold,
tangible stuff.
Buy gold and silver. Buy silver coins. Buy gold coins. That way, if something like that happens, you still have funds to go out and buy.
Robert Kiyosaki, right?
Yeah,
he's been promoting gold and silver or something.
Just keep on buying it.
This guy has been saying that he's been talking about the economy crashing, the world ending, right, for the last 15, 16 years.
Yeah.
And there was this guy who was convincing me, this is going to... I'm like, listen,
These
if you predict something 25 years, 50 years, 60 years, One of the years you might get it right.
Yeah.
That's not a prediction.
Yeah.
It's just saying the same thing over and over again.
Here's the thing, Sarkis. If you're really worried about that, if you're really worried about something like that happening, absolutely have some emergency supplies in your house.
Yeah.
Have a generator in your house. Have extra batteries in your house for your flashlights and things. Have a gun in your house because you're going to need that. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend buying a whole bunch of silver and gold. That's not really going to help you. What is going to help you is having some emergency supplies with you, and what's going to be used as currency in that situation. Let's say the internet's not working. Let's say the TV and the radio isn't working. There was some sort of really, really bad thing. I don't want to say it, but let's say there's something really bad thing happened. What's going to be the currency? And there's this theory that's going around. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to it, but it's an interesting theory. The theory is that ammunition will be used as currency.
Wow.
And so stockpile your 9mm, your 45s, your 38 specials.
If you want to know, I always, what I tell people is, when they ask me about that situation, I tell them, go on the streets, go into homeless encampments, go kind of follow them around for a few days or a few months and see, and you will see how things happen because they are actually trading things. It could be just the randomest, crappiest thing. It just says, hey, listen, I have a bicycle wheel.
Yep.
I have this on Western, and I forget this cross street. There's a bowling alley, and right in front of the bowling alley, there was a bike shop.
Yeah.
Homeless bike shop. This guy used to buy, and it was just right on this. You know how you sell tacos and stuff?
Yeah.
It was just a stand, and it was like probably 20 feet high. He had bikes, he had wheels, he had parts. And what happened was everybody used to go and steal bikes.
Yeah.
And they used to come and sell it to him. So he used to buy it for like $1, right?
Yeah.
The guy wanted $1, $2 to to get some drugs. And they were trading goods.
I got another example like that. So I was on my Harley at the time, and I was riding to I was visiting a friend in Skid Row, and I was a little bit worried about parking my Harley in Skid Row. So I pulled up and I put my kickstand down. Some guy, I think he was homeless. Some guy walked up to me. He said, "Hey man, you got a couple of bucks?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you need a couple of bucks for?" He's like, "I'm gonna go buy a beer." I'm like, "Where are you going to buy beer around here?" And he's like, "Oh, by the bootlegger over there." So there's a guy who's I guess he's a homeless guy. He's running a business where he goes into stores, he buys a whole bunch of alcohol, he takes it to his stand, and when guys come around, they pay him a couple of bucks. He makes like 50-cent profit or 25-cent profit on each beer he sells.
Skid Row has a huge rules and regulations.
So here's what I did. I took a $5 bill out of my pocket. I said, "Here's $5. I said, just do me a favor, keep an eye on my Harley, make sure nobody messes with it while you're here." He's like, "Okay." I was like, I'll keep an eye on it. He's like, "You want one too?" I'm like, "A beer?" He's like, "Yeah, you want one too?" And I'm like, "No, man, keep it for yourself." I'm like, I'm on my Harley, so I can't really, drink if I'm on a motorcycle, I'm not drinking. So, hey, it was funny because I'm like, yeah, dude, you gotta use you got to use the opportunities that come up. If some guy comes up, he wants a couple bucks to go buy a beer, I'd rather give the guy $5, and now I have a guy who's kind of like keeping an eye on my Harley for me. So hopefully he doesn't steal the wheel and go sell it. To the
come back, your Harley's gone.
That's almost there was a story like that, right? The millionaire that was trying to park in New York, or he was going on a vacation and he couldn't find parking, so he took his car to the bank, put his car as a collateral, borrowed $150 against his couple $100,000
title
car.
Loan.
He used that, and then the banker asked him, like, "What are you doing? You're a multimillionaire. Why do you
need a car title loan?"
Exactly. And then he's like, "Well, I couldn't find parking, so you guys have great parking over here."
Parking is more expensive than
There's that old story. I think it was from one of the Shakespeare plays where guy says, a horse, my entire kingdom for a horse. So this king was willing to give up his entire kingdom for a horse for that one instance because he needed a horse more than he needed anything else.
It's same thing with, I think, cryptocurrencies, and especially like the United States, and they want to do their digital coins as well. CBDC. Eventually, I think that's where we're going. I think we're heading. Every country is heading into that.
Sure.
and like the standard, when we went off the standard, it was something big. We're like, oh my God, if we're doing something new, this kind of things, impossible things, or it was thought to be impossible, going from the gold to just having no standards.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing about a CBDC. So what you're talking about is a central bank digital currency, and I think China has already kind of started doing that. This is one of the reasons why they wanted to ban Bitcoin mining, is they wanted to launch their own central bank digital currency. Now, I'm not going to say that can't happen in America. It obviously can, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult for the U.S. to go on a central bank digital currency, and there's a couple of reasons why. So the reason why they would want to go on a CBDC, on a central bank digital currency, is to get rid of cash, because they want to go on a cashless society, because now every single transaction is going to be easily tracked through the institutions that you're using, whether it's Venmo or whoever, or you're the bank.
They can see where it's going.
They can see it. They can track you very easily. You can't really have under the table dealings anymore with anyone. Also, it also gets rid of bank runs. So there's no more going to be this thing where there's a rumor that this bank doesn't have all the funds, so everyone's going to be rushing in and taking out. You can't really take out a whole bunch of cash from.
They can just shut it down and you're done.
Yeah, or there's digital. So all they need to do is just type in a number and add more money to the bank's balance, and they're good. So, but there's a couple of reasons why that it'll be difficult to happen in America. One of the benefit to a central bank digital currency is it allows the government to directly deal with the citizens, the taxpayers, directly, without having to go through a bank. You're going to have, say, a government wallet app on your phone where you're going to store your funds. That's good for the government. The government's able to track you. They have all your funds. And let's say that they do another UBI. You know what UBI is? They do another UBI, or they do another tax benefit or whatever. They could just directly send the money right to your wallet on your phone. They don't have to put the money in the bank anymore.
But is that beneficial for them?
It might be beneficial for the government, because
if they give you money right away, what's their? Because when you pay taxes, right? So they're like, some people get excited when they get tax returns.
Yes.
But they don't understand that the tax return is not actually a return. It's just they're returning, they're returning their own money that they exceedingly paid.
But most of the time, that tax return doesn't go to you; it goes to the bank, right?
Yeah.
It gets direct deposited in the bank. Or if you're old school, you get a check from the government and you go put it in the bank, or you go to the bank to cash it. Now the difference is if it's directly sent onto your government wallet. Now, let's say the government doesn't want you buying red meat. Let's say that the government says red meat is, by the way, good for you. But let's say the government, lies and says don't buy any more red meat. It's bad for you. Or you have a limited amount of red meat you can buy every week. If you go to Ralph's too many times and buy the discounted red meat. By the way, that's a great way to buy red meat on the cheap. Is Ralph's every so often discounts their red meat. It's still good. You think it's old. It's like no. It's still good. Go buy it at half price when it's on sale.
Sometimes aged meat, right?
Yeah, so aged meat, exactly. It's a benefit. You put it in your fridge for an extra week and age it further.
You know what happens is you go to restaurants and you see the meat outside or whatever, they have the environment, and it's been like 10 years or 5 years or 3 years. And then sometimes you're worried about like 1 year old.
So now the government can fine you for buying too much meat, or fine you for buying too much gasoline. It's like, no, you need to ride a bicycle. Not that I'm against riding bicycles. I think bicycles are great, and I hate traffic. So I understand the people who are like against cars, even though I'm known as Bitcoin Motorist online. I like motorcycles better. But I get.
You're like a cowboy.
Yeah, but I don't like it when you're told how much gasoline you can buy, or you're told how much red meat you could buy. And the government can do that. They can track that stuff. Or if you donate to, say, some cause with those funds that the government doesn't like, an anti-government organization or something, now you're like on a watch list or something. So this is all very bad news, right? Now the reason why it won't happen, or it will take some time for it to happen, is because the United States, at least for now, ironically, the US dollar is actually really valued all around the world. And there's people that use dollars all around the world. You can go to any country in the world, even maybe Iran, and they'll be using, maybe even North Korea, although it'll probably be hard.
They still hold
they might have actual dollars. Yeah. So people need physical cash in other countries, and it's a benefit to America that they have this physical cash in other places, like in Turkey and India and all these other places. They use US dollars still. Yeah. And if they go to completely digital, that goes away. And I don't know if the US wants to lose that. Another thing is, the person who's going to be resisting that, it's not just going to be the citizens. the banks are going to be against that too. So because the banks in America are so powerful, they may not want the government to just cut them out. It's like cut out the banks, and we'll deal directly with the citizen. The citizen's not going to be using a bank account anymore. They're going to be using an app on their phone, which is a government app and a government wallet. So I'm not too worried about a CBDC, at least not in America. And even if one does happen, to me, it'll be just like any of the other.
Just a secondary use of it.
It'll be like
likely.
it'll be closer to Ethereum than it'll be to Bitcoin.
Or like it's a debit card type of thing.
Yeah, it's a debit card, or it's just going to be another altcoin. It's like, which coin are you using? Are you using Bitcoin or USD coin? I know there's an actual USD coin, but let's say it's Fed coin, or you're going to be using. Oh, we accept Fed coin and Bitcoin. It's like if every merchant is more willing to accept Bitcoin, it doesn't matter that the government is running the CBDC.
Yeah.
If merchants, so to me, Bitcoin, Bitcoin has won, not when people are accepting Bitcoin, because they already do that now. A lot of people already do accept Bitcoin. Bitcoin has won when merchants prefer Bitcoin. They say we'd rather take Bitcoin,
or they give you a discount.
Yeah, or they give you a discount, or they'll say you may even get to some places where they'll only take Bitcoin. It's like you want to go to 7-Eleven. Okay, you can spend Fed coin or Bitcoin, but then let's say you want to go buy something really expensive, like some industrial equipment, and they're like, you know what, we can't take Fed coin, man. You got to pay us in Bitcoin. I'm sorry, man. It's like.
Well, I think eventually, if they do turn it, some people will prefer. Let's say you said different countries, which I had never thought about that. Right, where it says when they're holding the dollar.
Yeah.
Because if they turn it digital, why is Iran going to hold dollars? Yeah. Why is Russia going to hold dollars? Because if they do hold digitally, what happens? The U.S. government can say, "Boop, erase."
Yeah.
Erase.
They have more control.
So they have more control. With the dollar, they can store it, and they still lose value, but it's better than holding, let's say, a yen or let's say any other world currencies, rupees or nobody wants to hold the rupees as a something that's going to save them if something happens. The dollar is the only currency that kind of gives you that value as safety.
It's another reason why I think that if we go to a standard where all the countries are switching to their own digital currency, the U.S. will be either the last one or one of the last ones. I mean, currently you've El Salvador, where El Salvador doesn't even have their own nationwide currency, or I think they actually did have it, but nobody uses it. El Salvador, de facto, the U.S. dollar is their national currency, and this is one of the reasons why El Salvador switched to Bitcoin as their. I don't know if you heard the news; it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they actually paid their national debt. Now they don't actually. I think they're using whatever they're making inside. They don't borrow from the outside.
Wasn't it now considered one of the safest countries or something like that?
The guy just cleaned it off.
I don't know if it was directly related to them going to Bitcoin, but basically it's funny because
new president came in.
President
he just changed
all the gangster
because of Bitcoin. Actually, because of Bitcoin and everything else that he did, the revenue that they're raising now. That's what I was reading recently. They're not depending on any debt from the outside. Whatever they do is they're managing. Actually, they are literally sufficient at what they collect and what they spend. They're not overspending. They're actually managing it.
Yeah, they're managing it well.
Probably only country in the world.
They're lending it out now.
Yeah, that's what it said.
They're lending it out. They're buying one Bitcoin a day with their national treasury. So they're buying one Bitcoin a day. So today they have one more Bitcoin than they had yesterday. Tomorrow they'll have one extra Bitcoin. They're buying one Bitcoin a day. El Salvador is, and they were able to take care of their crime problem. The funny thing about the El Salvador crime issue is that there's an argument to be made that it didn't actually originate in El Salvador, because there's this one really notorious gang called MS-13, and it's an El Salvadoran gang. So they're like, oh yeah, there was all these really bad, gangbangers in El Salvador. These MS-13 guys, they're tatted all up, and it's like, yeah, but that gang didn't actually originate in El Salvador. I believe it originated in Southern California, because a whole bunch of, there's a whole bunch of El Salvadoran immigrants that went to America. And then these youths, they joined together, they joined this gang, and then the U.S. deported them back to El Salvador and didn't tell the El Salvador government they were dumping these criminals there, and they continued their gang. So if anything, El Salvador should be mad at America for sending all their criminals there, and now they rounded them up. They put them all in. I mean, luckily
it's a even trade at this point.
They're all tatted up, so it's so easy to identify them. But here's the test. To me, this is the test with Bukele, because I think Bukele is doing a really good job in El Salvador, and hopefully there's some more countries will follow suit. Like Mexico is not going to follow suit. Mexico has too close a ties to America.
Yeah,
they're not going to do what El Salvador is, at least not yet. And Mexico has their own peso. El Salvador didn't. El Salvador didn't have their own national currency. So there might be some other countries which use the US dollar as their primary currency that will adopt Bitcoin. El Salvador was the first one. Hopefully they're not the only one. But the test for El Salvador will be what happens when Bukele is no longer in power.
Yeah.
That to me is going to be interesting. I'm going to be now maybe he becomes a dictator and he's in charge for the rest of his life, and then I guess it's not an issue, at least not in our lifetime, because he's like basically our age, or he's a little bit younger than me.
I think under 40. I think.
He's like 40 or something, or under 40 when he became president. Like so what happens if there's a peaceful transition of power, if Bukele serves out his term and somebody else comes in? That is when I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with El Salvador, because Bukele wants a bunch of Bitcoiners to move to El Salvador, but they're not going to move there if it's dangerous, if they're feeling like their life's at risk. This is why he did this whole roundup of all these criminals and put them in this big jail. And a lot of Bitcoiners were upset with that, because we're all, we're not all, I shouldn't say, I don't speak for all of them, but a lot of us are very much into liberty and freedom, and you shouldn't be able to round up a bunch of people just because you don't like their tattoos and things like that. But there's the theoretical, I love liberty, and there's the practical, I want to be safe. So you have to balance what's practical and what's theoretical. And to me, that is the big issue there. And so Bukele and a lot of Bitcoiners have moved to El Salvador. And if you go to El Salvador, like as a tourist, and let's say you're a Bitcoiner and you want to tip the cab driver, or if you want to tip the waitress at the restaurant in Bitcoin, they'll have a wallet on their phone. They'll be able to they'll be able to take Bitcoin. But what a lot of people, I've heard some people advise who've been to El Salvador. I haven't been there yet, but I do want to go. A lot of people have said, pay for things in dollars, because the locals prefer dollars because it's more stable. So like if you're going to ride a cab, pay for the cabin fare in dollars, pay for your restaurant fare, your meal in dollars, but tip them in Bitcoin, because they'll know how to accept it, and, they'll appreciate it. And that way they know they have the dollars to pay for their necessities, and they can keep their tips for to see if the Bitcoin price goes up. So yeah, and overwhelmingly, Bukele has a very positive. He was just reelected, and he's got a very high approval rating. And it's funny because the IMF is really upset with El Salvador, and it's like, why are you upset with El Salvador? Just because they're not reliant on you anymore, for their infrastructure. The IMF is sending out all this stuff about, Bitcoin is bad for the environment, and El Salvador is wrong, and they're risky, and they're doing the bad thing, and it's like none of that stuff has paid to fruition. Has come to fruition. It's just so funny to see how people react to just the government trying to be responsible and trying to manage their government funds properly, and all these idiots that don't know anything about what they're talking about, who have these PhDs in economics, but they don't know a damn thing about economics. And I can say that because I have a bachelor's degree in economics, so I can tell you that learning about economics through school is just basically you're just being told what to say, and you're repeating it back, and you're getting your A. That's what it is.
School is just that. I think school is mostly to get you in line, put you on a track, make you a good citizen. Mm-hmm. School is just to, when you look at schools and prisons, they're identical.
Absolutely.
If we go deep into that, we're not gonna.
What happens is, when you go to school, you have what? It's almost like you're surrounded by a wall of fences, right? So nobody comes in and nobody goes out, and you get there, they tell you what to do, they give you your lunch, and then they let you go. It's like a halfway house, basically, for your kids.
It's like if you want to do criminal justice reforms, one of the big people that. One of the big lobbyist groups that are against criminal justice reforms are like the groups that supply food to the prisons. There's like, well, if you have less prisoners, we're not going to be able to sell food to the prisons. And it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if I find out that some of those same companies are also supplying food to the schools as well.
School foods are. I mean, you've been in public schools. Yes, we've been all of that. Yeah. Our lunches were like so horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it was like really bad food. It was like it was like a pizza, and it was like a disgusting pizza. Actually, you know what? I actually did go to
the foil ones.
Yeah, I actually went to private school for a few years before I went to public school. And then when I went to public school, I was actually really surprised to see the food that they had there, because in the private school, I think we brought our own lunches. And then in the public school, they had school lunches, but it was like bad food, and it was disgusting food, disgusting hamburgers and disgusting pizzas and stuff. And I'm like, they let kids eat this stuff? Like, this is stuff you would throw in the trash. I was really surprised. Thankfully, I don't know about I haven't been to public school in years, so I don't really know anything about it right now, but I've heard there's been movements to make the food better. I don't really know if it's actually better or if it's just, they put a carrot in your plate. It's like, okay, that's probably worse than the pizza, to be honest. Where's the carrot been?
Yeah, vegetables are actually more dangerous nowadays. You see a lot of a lot of stuff happening.
Pretty much.
But it's in a nutshell, I think, Bitcoin has proven a lot of things in the history of Bitcoins that, from 2009.
Yep.
I think a lot of people are now looking at it as a safety, and I think you gave us a great, we learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're thinking about...
We definitely got educated.
Yeah. If you're thinking about buying Bitcoin, what I would say is, what I don't want you to do is rush out and put way too much money in Bitcoin than you're comfortable with. And then the next time that there's a price dip, you panic and you sell and you lost money. I don't want that to happen. So I say put some money into Bitcoin, money that you're comfortable putting in, that you're not going to worry
or if
about.
You lose it, you're not.
Yeah, you're not too concerned. Or if it goes down in value, you're not too concerned. Put some money in Bitcoin. Use that as an opportunity to learn about Bitcoin. If you're interested in Bitcoin, learn about mining, learn about how to hold your own keys so you actually have control of it. To me, that's the path to take. I don't want to go on a podcast and tell people, oh, Bitcoin's good, the future, it's going to go to $10 million, and you should make sure you buy some right now. It's like, yeah, you should have some, whether that amount is $50 or $100 or $1,000 or $10,000, that's up to you. I'm not here to tell people but you shouldn't have, to me, zero is the wrong number. Don't have zero. Have some. Have a little bit to learn about
Diversify it or whatever you want. See that, and then I'm going to say this, and then we will have another 5 minutes and 10 minutes. We'll close it up. But a lot of people, when they look at prices now, like even the stock market, and I bought different other stocks, but people talk about stocks, and I have a friend that said, "Oh, you know what? This stock, by the way, in 5 years ago it was this. Now it's $3,000 or $2,000 a stock." I'm like, you know what? You can never look at the prices now and what it was. Because, at any point, number one, you never invested. Mm-hmm. Number two, if you did invest it, you didn't know when you would have left it.
Right? Exactly.
Because there's no one person, there's probably, I will say, maybe 1% of investors that will keep something that they buy for 20 years or 10 years or 15 years. Because if it was, let's say you had a Bitcoin, there was a guy that bought pizza, 130 Bitcoins for a pizza, or 1,000 for a pizza, or something like that.
So it was
$20,000,
20,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas.
That's what I'm saying.
No way.
Yeah, so because it had no value. But a guy had that much then. Mm-hmm. He got rid of it for a simple pizza because he wanted to prove that he can actually spend it.
That was an expensive pizza he had.
Yeah, now it's
unforgettable pizza.
We're not even going to talk about the price at that.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. And so that's why I always tell people, even in our business, and now it's not about when you what the stocks are now. It's what you're going to do and what you're disciplined to do. Because if you're not holding it for a long term, you might sell it at 100 and never go back into it.
This is why I've never regretted not getting into Bitcoin in 2011. The first time when that guy told me at work about it, I think Bitcoin, I'm not sure what price it was, $8, $10 or something like that. I never regretted not getting into it at that point, because I knew that there's no way I would have just bought it and just not touched it. Like I would have probably done something silly with it anyway, or I would have stored it on an exchange, and the most popular exchange at that time, around that time, was Mt. Gox, and Mt. Gox went out of business,
and you lose everything.
So I'm like, I would have probably just lost those Bitcoins on Mt. Gox anyway. So I've never regretted not getting into Bitcoin when I first heard about it. Now I do have some regrets in Bitcoin that I think that there was later on. I did do some silly things with my Bitcoin that I wish I hadn't done. But as far as that initial, like, oh, I should have gotten in when I first heard about it, I've never had that thing where
people used to talk about it.
Yeah.
To me. Yeah. In 2010, 11, and I thought people were crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't understand
time.
what they were talking about. Farming, they were talking about numbers, digits. I'm like, dude, how the hell do you buy? Okay, and I used to tell them, where can you spend it? They're like, oh,
well, now that Silk Road's shut down, you can't buy drugs with it anymore.
Yeah, because
there's too much technology going on for me to.
Yeah, and I was going to advertise, and at that time, we were still doing insurance and so on and so forth. I was going to put some ads different places, and at certain websites they required Bitcoin, and the crazy thing was when Bitcoin started hitting those markets. And I was like, man, did I ever buy it? Because, because at that point, maybe it was like literally not even $1, not even a cent. It was like not even a penny, right? So, and I went and looked at every platform that there was that, those people used and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, there was not. I was like, God damn it. Imagine if I had let's say 100.
Hopefully you find it one day. Hidden somewhere.
No, I know your hard drive. You could find an ad file.
That's the thing. And a lot of people are locked out of their whole monies and things like that. And it's a crazy situation. And I think it's an interesting path that we're going into, that we're going to experience.
Yeah.
Greg, do you have anything that you want to add to?
I got nice educational podcast today.
This is one of the best things that we do, is because we learn a lot of things. And I think no matter how much you know,
absolutely, you're always learning.
Somebody else brings a different perspective. Like, a lot of the things you said today. And I hope that our viewers will get the full spectrum of it, the whole thing that you talked about, different areas, different things. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sarkis.
And hopefully, we'll have you on here for
anytime.
Multiple other things.
If there's enough demand for a sequel, let me know. I'll come back. If there's any unanswered questions, like if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you guys are curious about, let Sarkis know, and I can come back.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have a lot of our guests. We'll have it repeated on. To share, because we can only share, let's say, so much in 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and so on and so forth, and all the questions that we might have. But thank you for joining us, and we hope we'll have all the information of yours, so they can contact you. Do you want them to contact you?
We could put the link to the website, bitcoinmentor.io, if you want to put a link in there somewhere in the description.
Yeah, we'll put it, and we'll tag you on your Instagrams and so on and so forth, so that way people will know. And if they have questions for you, and if, of course,
reach out to me. My DMs are open on Twitter, so if you have a question, let me know. If you go to bitcoinmentor.io, let them know that Sarkis sent you or Greg sent you, so that we'll know where to properly credit the person that referred. So let them know, let me know, or let whoever you talk to know that you heard about it from Sarkis, so that we can know.
We don't promote it, but thank you for the plug-in. But
sure.
We always tell people, you're not sponsoring us.
No, I'm not. There's no kickback. I'm not giving them anything. I just want to know where we would like to know where you heard it from.
So those are the whole things that we're not sponsored. We're not paid for to promote anything that we're talking about on here as well. So thank you, Patrick, and appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Soon in the future.
Thank you. I had a blast.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Follow us, and we'll see you guys next time.